Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is hearing from several experts on sexual misconduct in the military to consider a woman as defense minister as he builds a new cabinet. The calls are based on a belief that Harjit Sajjan has lost credibility when it comes to addressing what senior commanders themselves have described as an existential crisis within the Canadian Armed Forces. Charlotte Duval-Lantoine of the Canadian Global Affairs Institute says appointing a woman could bring new perspectives to the portfolio. But she cautions that tying a female defense minister's appointment to the current crisis could undermine her competence and see the blame put on her if the military fights culture change. Well, joining us now to discuss this further is Ms. Charlotte Duval-Lantoine herself. She is the Ottawa Operations Manager and a Fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. Ma'am, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thanks for having me today.
So let's start with a quick overview of the military's record of handling cases of sexual misconduct and why experts are calling for a new defense minister in the first place.
So we have seen for the past 3 decades quite an inaptitude of really dealing with prevention and response to sexual misconduct issues. And we have seen since the spring of 2021, the Minister of National Defense at the time, Harjit Sajjan, quite unable to really gain momentum and to really move forward on this issue, especially since the Deschamps report in 2015.
And you say, along with other experts, that appointing a woman can provide new perspectives to this portfolio. So can you tell us a little bit more about these perspectives here?
I think that a woman could bring new perspectives because she has different lived experience, but I mean that in terms of like the general defense portfolio and not just the issue of sexual misconduct. I have a problem with just tying a woman to the issue of sexual misconduct because it gives the impression that only a woman can deal with that problem when it's actually not the case. What we need is a more forceful defense minister that is able to really direct the Canadian Armed Forces in their efforts to change the culture.
So this seems like a very tricky situation, ma'am. You previously indicated that tying the defense minister's appointment to sexual misconduct may actually undermine her competence. So what do you mean by this, and how can we go around this situation here?
So the issue is that what we call the glass cliff, which means that we appoint a woman in time of crisis, and then when she is not able to change the culture or like address a crisis, we tend not to appoint a woman in that position for a long time, even though it is not the fact that it is a woman that could per se, that could address the issue. It is more an institutional problem and a problem of civilian governance of the Canadian Armed Forces. So to go around this, we need to really have a government that asks itself questions about what it needs to do to better improve its relationship with the Canadian Armed Forces and what it requires for the Canadian Armed Forces to really change its culture long term.
All right, ma'am. Well, coming off the heels of the federal election, how can our new government set up the next defense minister for success in managing this very difficult portfolio, regardless of their gender?
I think that we need to ask ourselves the question of whether our governance system of our defense portfolio is working today. We have an integrated defense department, which is fine, but we have seen defense ministers trying to take more of a laissez-faire approach to some issues within the military. We need a defense minister that actually directs the Canadian Armed Forces in their effort and monitors them throughout the process. Having a stronger parliamentary committee would be helpful as well. And unfortunately, we have seen the failure of it in the past few months. So we really need to have more proactive members of parliament and more proactive minister, like we have seen after the Somalia Commission of Inquiry, where you have Minister Doug Young being very proactive in pursuing reforms within the Canadian Armed Forces.
All right, ma'am, just about a minute left. But in 1993, the first and only female defense minister in Canada was Miss Campbell. But that was just about for 6 months. So can you tell us a little bit about how she governed and has anything changed since then?
So Kim Campbell, there is a lot of politics involved in the fact that she was defense minister for only 3 years, but she came at a time that was very difficult for the Canadian Armed Forces. You had budget cuts, you had the Somalia affair that was blowing up at the time, and you also had gender integration. And what we have seen is that as most other defense minister at the time, she was quite laid back. She was leaving the chief of the defense staff really leading what the Canadian Armed Forces needed to be done within their own culture. And it is quite understandable, since we consider the Canadian Armed Forces as a profession that needs to regulate itself.